We go, and we will get started. We had some members ask if we would do another workshop because our fall workshop in 2023 had a lot of communication information in it, and Amber oversaw that along with Megan and Courtney. And so great info back then. But we've had some requests to go through and talk a little bit about presenting information and speaking and different things. And so this is a workshop on how to become a better communicator. No matter what our skills are, we can always become better, especially at communicating with people. And realize that we could spend 3 hours on this topic. We could spend a weekend on this topic. We could spend a whole week on it. And people have, bachelor's and master's degrees in communications. And so, you can go get professional degrees in all of this information. And Amber is a professional in this field. So we appreciate her expertise that she'll be sharing tonight as well. So you are getting an essence of a number of different topics, not a deep dive into any one of them, but we can stop and talk, we can stay on after, and we could, in theory, do an additional workshop if we wanted to do that. So we'll go ahead and get started. And Amber, do you want to screen share there? Thank you. And welcome everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the James Brown.
Okay. Thanks, Diane. All right. So, Amber, I'm going to do some slides, and Amber's going to do some slides with the topics that are on there. And just on a baseline level, whenever we do these presentations, I like to start with whatever the meaning is that we're talking about. So the purpose of communications, or communication, is the exchange and flow of information and ideas from one person to another. And when we communicate effectively, everything goes smoother. We think more clearly, people understand us better, we're able to get our point across. And a lot of times when we're communicating, we're trying to get our point across for a reason, to get a group or a person to take action or to understand something better. We can build better rapport interacting with people. We're able to persuade or influence people. We also, if we're good communicators, can appear more confident, and we can make sure that our audience understands our message and whatever it is we're trying to get them to understand, what our expectations are, or whatever the information is that's being shared. So, go on to the next one. In leadership roles, communication is really a critical skill. Good leaders need to be good communicators, and that's because that's part of our job as a leader, sharing information and working with our teams of people to do, whether you're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or a club president, or a leader, a chair of a committee in our club, or in whatever other aspect of your life you're in. Passing on of information back and forth is critical. So we have some photos here of people that are good communicators over historical times. And I liked this quote by Gerald Ford, who was the 38th president of the United States. Communication is fundamental to leadership. If I got the chance to start over again, I would go back to school and learn to become a better communicator. This is paramount to getting anything accomplished, and I would have definitely been a much better leader. And I think that's one of those things that, as we said at the start of this, we can always continue developing communication skills. Team unity, trust building, and collaboration are all part of your leadership role. And effective communication helps a team feel valued and helps them to feel like they're part of a shared purpose in whatever you're trying to do. In Altrusa, it's often service-related things helping our community, but again, you might be a leader in different arenas of other parts of your life outside of Altrusa. Active listening and open body language can help leaders build trust with their teams. And collaboration, which is so important as a leader. Having effective communications can help leaders work on projects, encourage productive conversations, and also deal with conflict that sometimes comes up, whether it's a difference of opinion or different ways of doing things on something that our teams are working on. So those are a few of the ways that communication, strong communication, effective communication facilitates strong leadership. And I think Amber's going to run with this one.
Yeah, so anything that prevents us from getting our message across is called a barrier to communication. And as we grow our clubs, we should be aware of barriers that could occur when we're speaking to our own groups, when we're recruiting new members, or if we're talking to other organizations and partners. So some of these barriers can include like just physical things, loud background noise or faulty audio. We could be talking to someone who speaks English as a second language. There could be cultural differences between us and our audience, or personal situations that can impact someone's understanding, or even our audience could have bad feelings or preconceived ideas about our topic, which can change the way that they receive our information. So just being aware of these barriers can help us kind of assess our audience and change course when necessary. So active listening it's a communication skill that involves paying attention to the speaker and showing respect for what they're saying. Active listening comes in handy in one-on-one situations or in group settings. Giving the speaker your full attention and acknowledging the message. Use body language and gestures to show that you're engaged, like head nodding or smiling when appropriate. Ask clarifying questions to ensure that you understand the message, and reflect on what the speaker said by summarizing their words. Allow the speaker to finish their point before responding or asking questions, and form your response after you've received and clarified the message. Nonverbal communication. I'm a hand gesturer, so this is something that I think a lot about. Your actions speak louder than your words, and nonverbal communication skills refer to the ways in which we convey messages without using words. So posture is important. Sitting or standing tall with your shoulders back signals confidence and professionalism, whereas slouching or crossing your arms can suggest that you're bored or defensive. Regular and comfortable eye contact can help to encourage a sense of trust, because it shows that you're paying attention and are engaged in the message you're receiving. Facial expressions can be an indicator of your interest. For example, smiling can project warmth and approachability. Raising your eyebrows can indicate a reaction to what someone else is saying. Or like a frown can make it look like you don't want to be there. Hand and arm movements can support verbal messages and help emphasize key points, but also be aware of fidgeting if you're nervous. So like maybe take a couple of deep breaths or close your eyes for a moment to kind of get fidgeting under control. When we're nervous, we tend to stiffen up. So try to project that you're comfortable, even if you're faking it. Roll your shoulders or take a quick stretch before you enter the room to kind of release any tension. You can lose trust with your audience if you appear to be distracted. So actions like looking at your watch or out the window or checking your phone, avoiding eye contact or staring at the person next to you, or just one person in the audience, can kind of make people feel like you've lost interest. Is there any questions so far?
Before we go on to cover this this next topic, I would like each person to unmute and to share a time briefly. Keep it short, but share a time that you heard a speaker in some realm of your life that really inspired you or excited you. You thought that they did a great job, and don't need to hear what the topic was about, but what caught your attention? Why were they memorable? What stuck with you in terms of how that person delivered it, or their messaging, or whatever it was that made it memorable? If you've listened to a memorable speaker. Yeah, Lovey.
This last year on our vocational banquet that we have to give awards we had a speaker that spoke from his heart and spoke of experiences, that really, I mean, it really got to the kids. You could tell they were listening. We were all listening. And you just, and all of his posture and everything. I mean, it was like it was heartfelt. And that's the best speaker I've ever heard.
Awesome. Thank you. Lovely. Anyone else?
Debbie, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, go ahead, Joe.
Went to a continuing education workshop, and the speaker was so into his own program, and he was so intense that everybody was just sitting on the edge of their chair listening to him. It was wonderful.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, that makes a big difference. Anyone else?
I would say Alex last year at conference. And cute story. I thought he was very professional, very, I don't know what the word is. That's why I'm not good with words. But what's cute is I met him outside the night before in our pajamas. And I had no clue until, I don't know if you heard the story, Debbie, but you had me go get him to take him to Nancy.
Yep.
And then it's like, he's like, I know you. I'm like, you do. And then it dawned on both of us. And we're like, oh shit, really?
It's
And
okay.
then
He wears pajamas at night too.
and then Nancy later on that day, she made a comment. Yeah, he met one of our members outside last night. I said, Nancy, that was me.
Yeah.
But no, but besides that, he was very professional. And I'll admit some of his things I didn't wholeheartedly agree with. But I don't agree with all
That's
the
okay.
details sometimes.
But his delivery was strong and he was very
Yes, ma'am.
passionate when he talked about things.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Anyone else have a speaker that was really memorable?
I've had a couple,
Mm-hmm.
and I think what makes them the most memorable to me are those that don't feel like they're giving you a lecture. They're actually very personable, and they come across like they're talking to a friend.
Yep.
Yep.
Great. Thanks, Kim.
I will say that at conference last year, when Tor got up and did his presentation, excuse me, I mean, it just was so heartfelt coming from him and touched my heart also. And I just thought he did phenomenal with that.
So it's very interesting in the things that were shared so far. At completely valid points, 4 or 5 different speakers that have been mentioned tonight, but some things that are coming through from what you're saying. People believe in what they're saying. They feel comfortable as they're talking. They're engaging, capturing your attention. You might be sitting on the edge of their seat, of your seats, and they're speaking from the heart. And I know I started the Children's Museum here in Pendleton long time ago. And I so believed in the importance of having a children's museum that I didn't need notes. I could speak from the heart about when I went and talked to a bunch of different groups trying to fundraise essentially and to get it going, that I could just talk on why this was so important, why kids needed it. And when you are comfortable with what you're going to talk about and you are passionate about what you're going to talk about, you can just talk. You can talk from your heart. And that's some of what you're saying that made it memorable for you. And you can also tie in little stories or things that bring it alive for your listeners. So let's talk a little bit about verbal communication. Most of us talk to people every day in some form or another. And the goals when you, Amber, you want to screen share again, please? The goals when you speak are to come across as comfortable and confident, relaxed and engaging, which is things that some of you just picked up on from memorable speakers. You're speaking so that people can understand you and you want them to remember what you're saying. You want them to remember your message. You want them to be able to take some kind of action or incorporate the information they're sharing into whatever whatever the purpose of that information is. And so we've got their goals, content, organizing your message, and thinking about what you want to communicate with people and what you want them to get out of it. So as a speaker, in whether you're giving a presentation to a huge group or just talking in a club or in some other realm of your life, know your objective. What do you want the listener, not you, not what do you want to say? What do you want the listener to understand or to feel or to do after hearing you speak? Identify that before you start creating your speech, because that is what is going to drive everything that you put together. And this is whether you are just doing an impromptu kind of a conversation, if you're trying to communicate something important, or whether you're giving a presentation to a group for a particular purpose. Organize all your main speaking points to support the objective of whatever you want your listeners to get out of your information that you're sharing. Focus on saying something that's memorable and interesting to your audience. And stories are a great way to do that, because I'll guarantee if you've heard a person tell a story as part of a presentation, that's usually part of what you remember from that person. And it's why it brings it alive for someone, because we can relate to stories. We're storytelling people. Even if we're not good at telling stories, the information in a story sticks with us. And that is a helpful way to share information. And I'm sure we've all been to speakers who go on about a bunch of numbers and data and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And some of it may be interesting, and somewhere along the way, you're not focused quite as much anymore. They kind of lose you. And so when you can incorporate real life information and stories into what you're sharing on any topic, it will be much more memorable for your listener. To have people remember what you say, try and limit yourself to 5 key points. I don't remember, I should have thought of this before tonight. There was a well-known newspaper guy, David somebody or other, and maybe someone else will remember. And he always had number 1, number 2, number 3. And it was very easy. He started off, I'm going to talk about 3 things. And he had articles in newspapers and he spoke publicly. And he then said his 3 things and whatever the subtopics were. And at the end, he went back and summarized. So we talked about number 1, number 2, and number 3. And it became very clear, those 3 key takeaways. He kept it to 3 main points, no matter what he was talking about, because our brains can wrap ourselves around certain things. 52 things, 25 things, it turns into mush, and we still tend to absorb a handful of small points that were shared with us, and the rest of us we don't remember anymore. So for maximum retention of your listeners, come up with 3 to 5 main points, and you can have supporting information under that, but hammer back on those couple main points so that people remember what you say. The other thing is to have some kind of a short cheat sheet with your key points that are on there. It's easy to read from a script, but when we read from a script, we're looking down at a sheet of paper, we might look up for a minute, and we don't have eye contact with our audience. So one of the things when you're presenting is to have an outline or bullet points of key points you want to make, and have practiced what you're going to say enough that you know what those points are, and you can just glance down at your notes to keep you going in the order you want to go in or whatever, but not to be reading something completely through. Connect with your audience as you're talking. Content is at the heart of effective speaking, but how you deliver it shows your heart on how much you believe in what you're sharing and how you can pull people in to understand and be passionate about whatever it is you're talking about. So in that delivery, there's physical behavior, there's eye contact. When I am up public speaking, and some people are absolutely terrified of public speaking, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. But when I am up talking to a group, whatever size, I find people in the audience, and I look over here to Karen, and then a little bit later I look over there to Dina, or I look at a stranger that I don't even know who they are, but I make eye contact with them. And when you think about it, when you have one person and you look at their eyes out somewhere in the audience, whether you know them or not, they may think that you're looking directly at them, and you are, but 10 people around them also may think you're looking directly at them, because people can't quite tell when they're sitting in an audience. So you're capturing that little pod of people, and then you shift your eyes over to another part of your audience and do the same thing. And those people all of a sudden are being pulled into you, drawn into what you're saying even more, because you're not just staring at a sheet of paper. You're looking around the room. You're connecting with different people, even if you don't know them. It doesn't matter. You can still connect with people through eye contact. And you can see I'm using gestures and Amber uses gestures, and that emphasizes points. The other thing is, if you have the space in the place you're presenting, you can move around. Sometimes that can be distracting. You don't want to be hiking all over. But if you'll remember, Dina, you brought up Alex last year. He didn't just stand at a podium. He came down and he walked around a bit, and he went over to this side and he went over to that side and he pivoted around. And if it's not, crazy movement, then it keeps you kind of following your speaker and makes it a little bit more interesting. Use of voice. You want your voice to be understandable, intelligible, but you don't want to talk in a monotone thing all the time, because then you really lose people, because then it's really boring and there's no ups and downs. So if you can accelerate a little bit when you're really passionate about something, and you can drop down more softly if you want to emphasize something a little more quietly. When you talk quietly, people listen a little harder to hear what you're saying. And I'm not saying talk so quietly that the audience can't hear you, but use your voice to communicate different things as you're speaking. And the other little tidbit is speaker credibility. If you're going to talk, be familiar with what you're talking about so that you are credible, so that you appear to have some level of expertise. And one of those things as a leader is, a lot of us think that we're pretenders, that we're not good enough to be doing what we're doing. Put all that aside. If you are getting up to speak to a group, prepare yourself in advance so that you are a mini expert and you can communicate your message and you have prepared, and be sincere. If you've agreed to talk about something, then obviously you want to speak about it. And so be passionate about it, be prepared to do it, and people will buy into to your interest and your experience, and listen more intently. Let's see here. Yeah, we might as well go to public speaking since I'm kind of doing that. Um, so organize your thoughts before you go and present, and think about the couple main points that you want to communicate. Practice in advance. So many people are afraid of speaking to a group. It's one of the number one fears. If you prepare a speech, whether you write it out word for word in the beginning, or whether you make an outline, or whether you just put bullet point notes in the beginning, go, this goofy as it sounds, go and stand in front of a mirror and practice your speech a bit. When you feel kind of comfortable with it, if you've got a cell phone, hit record, prop your cell phone up somewhere, hit record, and give your speech to your cell phone or to some other friends who might be willing to listen to you. And then stop and go back and play it and think to yourself, would I want to listen to that person? Am I twirling my hair a little bit too much? Am I looking down too much? Analyze yourself, step back and analyze yourself, and see, is this interesting? Would I want to be in the audience listening to me? And then go back and do it again and again a few times to fix little things that you think need to be tweaked. When you do that and you get to a point of watching a recording like, yeah, yeah, I'm okay with that, that's the best I can do, then you're going to go out and give that speech much more confidently, because you got it to the point where you're comfortable with it and you're not hemming and hawing. And it's okay to stop and start when you're public speaking too. Those things happen. Don't draw attention to yourself. Oh my gosh, I forgot, whatever. But preparing in advance is going to calm those fears down immensely. Focusing on your audience, looking around the room, connecting with them, is also going to help that. And one of the things that I wanted to toss out is, when you go to lunch with a bunch of your best friends or dinner with a bunch of your best friends, and you have a glass of wine and you're sitting and talking about life, whatever is going on, whatever is happening in families or at work or whatever, and you're just conversing, right? You're just talking with your friends. You can do the same thing when you're giving a presentation to people. All you're doing is connecting. When you're sitting over a meal and talking with family or friends, you're public speaking. We just don't think of it that way because we know the people, we know they accept us, we know that we're okay speaking. So keep that in mind as you go and give a formal presentation sometime. They're just in an audience wanting to be your friend. They want to hear what you have to say. They're interested in you. Most of the time, they're not going to bite your head off. And so just be in the same place as if you're talking in a relaxed way to people who want to hear what you have to say. Hopefully that helps some of you in terms of reducing anxiety. And being positive is a huge selling point. One of the other things is understanding your audience. And I don't know if that was on the last slide or it's not really on this slide, but I do want to work it in. Not everyone has the same background or knowledge as you. So be sure to use language that your audience can understand. And also be sure to explain things in a way that will really communicate. Don't assume they get what you're talking about. Don't talk on too high a level, and also don't talk on too baseline a level. And in Altrusa, think about who your audience is. So as a governor of District 12, I do a lot of talking to a lot of different groups. I talk to the district board during board meetings or in other times, and they get certain content and certain messaging. I talk to club presidents on president's council meetings or on small groups of presidents for different purposes. And they have certain information that they need that the rest of the club doesn't need, or that they're going to be giving to their club. I talk to club committee chairs or district committee chairs, and they need certain information that doesn't need, but they don't need other information. We'll use an example as the conference committee that's meeting right now to prepare for our 2025 conference. You know, they are putting together an awesome conference, and they know all the fine details. And so they don't need to be convinced that conference is going to be amazing. They know it's going to be amazing. They're thrilled to pieces on working that out. But then when in a different communication thing, when we are putting together the call to conference, which that committee did all the articles for, and Sophie is working on right now, you guys as members who aren't on that committee might need to be convinced to go. We want you to register. We want to explain the great speakers we're going to have and the fun activities that are going on. So there's different messaging and conversations that happen with different groups of people. As a leader, stop and think, what does this group that I'm talking to need to know for who they are? What does this group that I'm talking with or writing to need to know for who they are? And have a conscious awareness of who your audience is in different things. Let's see, next slide.
All right, so let's talk just a minute about written communication. Communicating effectively in writing is all about the receiver, not the sender. It's what you want your recipient to understand and how you want them to receive your message. Effective written communication is clear, it's concise, and it's accurate. And it considers the needs of the audience. Like Debbie was just saying, you may be talking to different people at different times, but the same goes with written communications. You may be creating a brochure for potential members that have never heard of Altrusa, or you're writing minutes for your club meeting. So those types of communications are going to need to be written differently because maybe you don't need to use abbreviations when speaking to the public or writing communications for your website. So written communications includes a wide variety of things. That could be club reports, emails, newsletters, website content, the posts that you put on Facebook, brochures, etc. Some characteristics of effective written communication include clarity. Ask yourself, is the message easy to understand? What do you want the reader to learn, feel, and do with that information? Is it concise? Have you made sure that the message is to the point and avoids any unnecessary words? Is it factually correct? Does it include all the relevant details, dates, times, locations, different information that would be pertinent for the reader to understand? Is the message appropriate for the situation and the audience? Have you used correct grammar, spelling? Have you proofread the document or maybe had someone else look at it to make sure that it's free of errors? Does it have enough information to be understood and cover all of the main points? And is it simple, so where it's not unnecessarily complex and it can be read or scanned quickly? So that's a lot of information about I mean, we can't go into detail tonight about all of the different ways in which you can write content, brochures, how you can prepare different materials. We can definitely dig into that on a later date if you're wanting specifics. But just the overall consensus is you want to be able to relay information in a way that the audience you're intending to reach can understand and take action from what you're writing.
Or can I jump in with one thing real quick on
Yeah, of
that?
course.
Whether it's a letter or as Amber just changed over this slide, or an email or a text, I would toss out to you before you send something, by whatever form, stop and set it aside for a little bit and then just go back and make sure again that it is the message that you wanted, that you don't have typos in there or abbreviations, and that it's just clear for the person. Because I think we are all in a life where it's go 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 all the time. When texts come in and we shoot something off and send it, I'm so guilty of this. I type something out, I use the little speech thing, I don't necessarily double check it. I hit send and then I look at it and I'm like, oh, that was not the right word. And I didn't double check it. And same thing for emails, you know, take time to prepare something and just step back for a moment and reread it to make sure that it's what you want it to be before you hit send.
And that's a great segue to the email communication conversation, because this is probably where we spend a lot of our time. We receive hundreds, if not thousands, of emails every month. And so it's really important that when you're crafting email communication, that you're doing it in a way that you can get the attention of the person you're trying to reach, and that they, A, want to read your email, and B, are able to digest it quickly enough that they receive all the information you're trying to convey. So state your purpose for sending the email in the beginning of the message, and think of your words as a call to action. Keep your emails short. I'm guilty of doing a long email or two, but if I have to, given the circumstances, I make sure to use bullet points and bolding and spacing to where the person could maybe read, you know, a portion of the email and come back to it if the rest of it doesn't look interesting. Sometimes we must give a lot of information at once, especially for a big event planning or something that's coming up that really has a lot of information. But just be very aware that while you're crafting something like that, you want to make sure that your audience has time to read it and that they can pull the pertinent information, the most critical parts, very quickly. You can use that subject line as a way to grab the reader's attention. It used to be that you wanted to have a very short subject line. Then we started getting the abundance of emails. And so now I actually take quite a bit of space in the subject line, and I make sure that they know, you know, what organization we're talking about. People belong to multiple activities, and it may not be clear if you just write meeting on Friday, because maybe it's a meeting for their book club or any other place that they're going. And so I'll put the name of the organization, the date and the time, all of that stuff right there in the subject line. And so even if they don't even open the email, they know that there's a meeting on Friday. I do use abbreviations, and I think that's perfectly fine as long as they're well known. So for example, meeting can be abbreviated as MTG, and most people understand that that is meeting. You know, you don't use a bunch of jargon in your emails if you're speaking to a group or an audience that maybe doesn't understand those, maybe isn't a part of your group. Try to make sure that it's not too complex. Also avoid typing your entire message in capital letters, as it does come across as yelling. There are people that see better in all caps, and that's perfectly fine. Most email accounts have the option to type it in all caps if you choose the capitalization icon, and then you can change it back to regular size after you're done crafting it for yourself to read. That's perfectly okay. And you can also copy and paste out of Word documents, things, however it makes it easier for you to write the message. Just understand that if you send an email in all caps, it does feel like you're screaming at the person, and it's not always a welcome email to read. Always state that desired outcome in your message. If you have a due date, or there's an event coming up, or a meeting that's on a particular day and time, make sure that it says that very clearly so that someone glancing at your email could pull that information out as being very important. If you are saying that you are going to attach something, please remember to do that. That most email accounts now will stop you and say, you said the word attachment in your email, but you didn't include anything. So would you like to attach that now? If your email doesn't do that, just use extra caution when you say you're going to attach, meeting minutes or a copy of a brochure, that you've actually put that on the email. Also, let someone know in the body of the email that you have included an attachment. Sometimes your signature block will put an image as an attachment, or other things will come up to where the person maybe doesn't see that there's an attachment. So if you include that in the body of the email, they're way more likely to scroll down and open up that document or graphic or whatever you have attached. Proofread your message before you send it, just for accuracy and typos. I'm pretty famous for putting 2 different dates for the same thing in an email. And so I always like to go back to that and catch it before I send the email out. There's other things that, maybe you were crafting the email and you moved some sentences around, and so your copy paste is a little sloppy. It's just nice to, maybe close it out, come back to it later, reread it, and make sure that it makes sense. And finally, don't share anything in an email that you wouldn't want shared widely. People will forward, people will share. It is inevitable that a reply or a forward is going to go in a direction that maybe you're not anticipating. So please that should just be a general life rule. Don't say anything that you wouldn't want shared widely, but especially goes in emails. They're very easy to share. So just basic formatting of your email can really help ensure that your message is received. So again, use that clear and eye-catching subject line. I share the purpose or request right up front, and I stay on point. I make sure the body of the email includes all the relevant details, but it's short enough that the reader isn't tempted to skip over parts. I always reiterate the purpose or the request before I close the email again. And I include a nice closing like thank you. I usually say thank you, but sincerely works, or any other closing, and then your name. And then always, again, remember to attach a document or a graphic if you said that you were going to. And then there's a couple things to remember when you're replying to an email. First, make sure that you actually need to reply. Sometimes you were just included as a CC or a just for your information to keep you in the loop. And so most of the time, a reply to that original sender is enough. If you choose reply all, you can sometimes clog up people's inboxes unnecessarily, or maybe everybody didn't want to see the reply. So a general rule is just reply to that original sender, unless you're trying to schedule something, or the email is asking for a consensus, or something that kind of requires that reply all. I always do a quick double check before hitting reply to make sure that I've answered all their questions, or that I am replying to the correct email. Sometimes you might be in the wrong email and you think you're responding to someone, and you've actually gone to, the next in your inbox, and maybe just that double check of looking on who you've sent it to, what you've written, is always just a good practice. And then sometimes you'll need to update the subject line, or even just start a whole new email thread if the topics have changed. And that clarity will help to just make sure everyone's in the loop, remembering that we're getting dozens of emails a day, that you really want people to open yours up and have it be really clear communication. All right, communication during meetings. So engagement drop off is where people at your meeting are fully engaged in the beginning, and then after about 15 or 20 minutes, they wish they were somewhere else. So you can prevent that from happening. First of all, by coming to the meeting prepared. Facilitators should be ready to run the agenda, and participants should be ready to contribute. So all can encourage active participation by asking questions, using each other's names, allowing for time for all attendees to speak, and just making it feel like an open meeting in which people feel involved and engaged the whole way through. Facilitators should not do all the talking, and participants should have opportunities to join in. There should be openings for that, maybe questions from the facilitator, something that kind of encourages conversation and participation by people that maybe tend to stay quiet. Deciding as a group if the norms for the meeting will include things like raised hands, open discussion, or other methods of order. It's always nice to kind of have consensus prior on if you're going to take the time to call on each other or kind of how that facilitation will go. Having that consensus just makes it a little smoother, and that way you don't have people raising their hands and waiting for a long time and others just jumping in with conversation. Kind of deciding that ahead of time just makes things go a little easier. Don't meet just for the sake of meeting. Have a purpose and stated goals, and that will really help keep that engagement level up through the whole time. Be sure to speak loudly, clearly, and slowly enough for a secretary to take minutes if that is the case. We often go off on tangents during meetings or start talking very quickly about a topic, not remembering that there is someone in charge of taking notes that maybe we're kind of bowling right over. Keep to the time originally set for the meeting. When your participants can rely on that meeting ending on time, they're far more likely to be engaged with the topic and the subject matter and following along with the agenda. And facilitators should be comfortable redirecting conversations if they stray too far from the agenda. And participants should rein themselves in if they know that they're off topic. And this is a practice we can all use. We know that we tend to do side talk at a lot of things, and it does challenge the way that we can get through a meeting effectively with the communication flowing. And so just kind of having that in mind, that if you're facilitating something, be confident in redirecting and bringing people back to the topic at hand. And also, pay attention to yourself. It's always nice to socialize, but when we're trying to run an effective meeting where the communication goes as planned, we really do have to keep ourselves on topic. And then prepare for online and hybrid meetings. Set up your equipment early, do testing, and don't wait till the last minute to find out that your audio or your screen doesn't work, like I did today.
Sorry, Amber. Lovey, you have a question?
I do. There are times, and I've had this in other places too, where you're talking or somebody else is talking, and then somebody else is side talking. What is a good phrase? I mean, not shut up, or whatever. What is a good phrase to use to stop them from doing that? Anyone?
I generally say I'm having a hard time hearing, so I'll get the attention of the facilitator like I'm actually having a hard time hearing their words. And that generally triggers people to be more self-aware. And then I'm not calling someone out or having any type of confrontation. And I'm also not narking and saying, hey, they're talking over there. I just say, I'm having a hard time hearing. Can you raise your voice a little bit? And then that generally makes people realize that it's not the speaker, it's them.
What about if you are the facilitator and you want, you see them, do you stop? Do you stop talking?
Another thing you can do, and it doesn't call people out either, is say something to the effect of, obviously this is generating a lot of conversation. We're just going to stop for a moment so that everyone can give their attention back to the speaker, which doesn't attack anyone for Sally Lou. You need to be quiet. It just kind of acknowledges there's some chatter in the room and we need to let the speaker keep talking. That's another way. And a third
That's a
thing
good
to
idea.
keep in mind, and if you come to the Leadership Essentials workshop on February 13th, part of that content is using your parliamentarian. So, you know, in a lot of life, we don't have a parliamentarian, but in Altrusa, every club should have a parliamentarian. And so you can use your parliamentarian kind of as the gatekeeper, and that person can just say, can we have quiet in the room, please, or something like that before we
Oh,
continue on. So there'll be tips for that on that February 13th meeting as well.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Communication during presentation. So creating and giving a presentation can feel like a daunting task, especially if it's not something that you do regularly. But with the use of templates, technology, and a little practice, we really can all feel like a pro. So use Canva or PowerPoint templates as a starting point. They are almost completely built. They are type in, just put your content in there. Either system, and there's multiple others. Those are the two I'm pretty familiar with. But they are a great starting point. Just find something that you like and start putting in your content. And if you decide later to change colors and graphics, that's totally fine too. But at least you have a good starting point to kind of see how the layout and the flow of your presentation will go. If you're feeling really creative, you can always create your own from scratch in both of those systems or any other system. You can start with a blank slate. That's up to you. When you're building a presentation, be sure to use easy to read fonts. I'll tell you, the worst presentations are ones that, maybe red on top of black or something that's very hard for eyes to digest and see. So making sure that your fonts aren't too swirly and that your attendees can read along, that you've got an appealing color scheme, you're using eye-catching photos or graphics, and you can even add audio, video, and music when it's appropriate. You want to organize your presentation in a way that makes sense with a clear intro, body, and a conclusion. Be sure to back up your presentation. I usually do multiple formats. So I'll have the PDF sent to my email. If I have good Wi-Fi, I'll have it ready to go live like this one is. But have a couple of formats available to cover all your ground. So the worst thing is if you get somewhere anticipating that you're going to have steady Wi-Fi and for some reason it doesn't work. And so having a PDF that you could pull up and flow through is such an easy way to, save the presentation. And that way there's not a big gap before you get started. It may not be the way you would have preferred, but your presentation is available. I also bring on a thumb drive in case I'm using someone else's device and don't know that until I get there. If I need to plug a thumb drive into a different laptop, then I have it available that way too. Rehearse beforehand, either on your own or to a mirror, like Debbie said earlier. You can also use friends and family. That is something that I think has come in handy for me, is being able to give a presentation to someone that really doesn't care and is always going to be on your side, but is also willing to tell you that you said the word too much or something like that, and it's not going to hurt your feelings. Give yourself that time to build confidence and work out the kinks. Also going through a presentation, maybe you feel like that slide doesn't belong where you put it when you made your outline. And so now, because you're practicing, it doesn't sound right where it is. And you have time to kind of move your presentation around to make more sense as you are actually going through the flow of the slides. Create and bring notes if you find that helpful, or an outline. Be sure to stand tall, project your voice, and make eye contact with your audience. In seeking feedback, like I just mentioned, you can do that with a safe family or friend, or you can find someone maybe in your club or someone that you find to be a good speaker. See if they would be able to provide you with feedback. If you're working on your communication skills, keep an open mind and be willing to accept that critical feedback when it's offered in a constructive way. So use the information you receive to improve your abilities and to motivate your team. The better you are as a facilitator, a leader, and a communicator, the better your team is going to operate. When you're asking for feedback, be specific in your request. Don't just ask for feedback on my communication. Instead, ask about specific situations or areas that you want to improve. Choose the right people. So individuals that can provide honest and relevant feedback based on their experience working with you or living with you or being around you for 20 years. Create a safe environment so that people know that their feedback is valued and that there are not going to be negative consequences for providing honest opinions to you. And then listen actively, pay full attention to the feedback you receive, ask clarifying questions if needed, and show appreciation for their insights.
I want to share, I was just out in Cincinnati for the past couple weeks with my son and his wife and their kiddos. And I have a presentation coming up and I wanted their feedback. And so I gave that somewhat brief talk to them just to get their feedback. And it's kind of like Amber said, that in my head, I knew the different things that I wanted to communicate, but they saw where the gaps were. And they're like, Mom, that's really good. And this was good. And this was good. But it didn't make sense on this part. Maybe you could explain that a little bit more. And it was really useful because I had thought through things. I had cut things out. I'd added things. I'd moved stuff around. I got it to where I thought it needed to be, and they had never heard it. And so they were able to just hear it with fresh ears and say, yeah, this is all great, except this part you should add more context to. And so that's the value of finding a neutral person who can share their ideas with you so that you can decide if you want to adapt. Nancy, were you going to say something or no? Okay. Yeah, Lovey.
Okay, well, listening to everything right at the very beginning, there's one thing that Julie taught me when she was at our meeting, and I never thought about it, but crossing your arms, because when I cross my arm, I'm relaxing and I'm listening, and that is probably not the perception that the speaker gets. Or I'm just, my chest is where I rest them, so. But she told me a few times, uncross your arm, uncross your arms. And I go, okay. So, but I want Julie to know I am working on that very, very hard.
It's just body
Because
language.
Lovey, you
Lovey,
want to
Body language.
you want
if
you want
that
a
is-
hint, Lovey?
if
Uh,
that is your
Keep a
most
piece of paper or something in your hand. I
Yeah,
have the same problem. My entire meeting, I have something in my hand, so I don't stand there and do this, or I
yeah.
don't put my hands on my hip or my back pocket.
I know it's just,
Dina?
I'm really, when I fold my arms, that means I'm really listening. So,
Yeah.
Well, and I don't think you have to
Yeah.
change your whole
No,
personality
you don't have
to
to.
make the speaker feel good. There's other ways in which you can acknowledge that you're listening. This may
Oh,
be
I-
the most comfortable position, but if you're smiling and making eye contact and nodding along, they're going to know that you're paying attention.
Yeah.
But just as a general rule, just in general, it does kind of show a closed off attitude. But if you're engaged, and the speaker will feel that.
I feel it's Julie's rule. I'm following it.
Okay. So out of curiosity,
on
how many,
opening.
just out of curiosity, how many people here are fully comfortable with public speaking and do it regularly?
I am.
I am, even though I play shy.
Sort of, kinda.
So what advice
Sometimes.
would you give to other people that maybe don't feel as comfortable for kind of getting over that initial anxiety about public speaking? Or what are some things that you used in the past to be able to get to that point where you're comfortable? Or maybe you just from toddler on just wanted to be in the spotlight. That's okay too. But is there any advice that you other public speakers would have for people that maybe aren't as comfortable?
I do practice, because, well, I give speeches to other groups where I practice and, like you said, okay, this doesn't exactly fit here. It's kind of like a writing project, and and I put it there. But yeah, my husband is a very good listener, and he just shakes his head or whatever. But I have practiced to my cat, my husband, but and listen to myself, and I always have something, a joke or something, and if I can laugh at it, then I know that that I'm going to grab somebody else if I think of myself, if I'm funny. But no, just practicing a lot and really liking what you're talking about. If I have to look at notes the whole time or read something, I really don't even want to do it. I really want to like what I'm talking about because I'm a storyteller. Uh, my mom used to say, "You're little Jesus," because he lived in stories, So, but I go back to something that pertained to me that fits the subject, and it seems to draw people in. I don't know.
But someone
That's-
else. Thank you, Lovey.
I think
Anyone else
like
have tips?
something like along the same lines is just to over prepare. And it helps me to write it out, not completely, but at least the bullet points. And then the practicing in front of the mirror helps too.
Mm.
Anyone else?
I'm on the city council and we get an agenda. And of course I read all of that. Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's 100 pages. And I read through that and wonder where we might get public response or someone might ask questions. So I sort of try to anticipate if there will be discussion and not be caught off guard about that. And think of that in most of the time, the response is or the input is going to be oppositional and rather than positive. That's sort of how things are when you're sitting on a city council dais. But I try to think how I can respond positively to something when my first inclination would be, are you crazy? But you cannot say that when you're sitting on the city council. So I try to think about how I can respond positively to some negative input. And that's been helpful a few times when that's exactly what happens. So
Terry.
I know that I talk too much and tend to get off on the subject a little bit. So I know I have to work on gearing things down. Lovey, were you rolling your eyes? Anyway, that's one of the things I know I have to work on when I am talking with others or doing that, is that I have to stay on subject and not get off track.
My husband was just laughing at you because I fit your, I'm you.
I know.
I think, being an effective speaker or running an effective meeting, it takes a lot of self-awareness for that, because especially if we have created the agenda or we have a big part of either obviously the talk or some component of a meeting, we want to jump in and flush the whole thing out. But sometimes the best thing you can do, and Amber covered this early on a bit, is being a listener. That's one of the greatest skills of effective communication, is being quiet yourself and letting other people speak, and not, we all, when someone starts talking, we all start to formulate our response of what we're going to say back. But if you can turn your brain off and just listen to what they're saying, you're going to be able to respond that way, or incorporate what they're saying into what you wanted to say, or challenge back if that's, what the need is. But that's an important thing, to be able to turn on your speaking and turn off your speaking, to let other people have input. Good understanding of yourself there, Terry.
Thank you.
Amber, I had a question.
Mhm.
A lot of what I do in my professional life is there's a basic process, and then the relatableness is how I get up and personal with people. And I feel if I've done my job well, it all looks smooth to them, and they haven't seen all the bumps underneath. So, and I tell them that because I want them to enjoy the process. But one of the things I found I started doing in Altrusa is one, other people tell me I talk too much. So yes, that's true. In Altrusa, I do because I like stories. But in my email communications and sometimes for work, I have to do longer ones. I use color in my email presentations and like for club fundraisers, when I was in charge of a lot of those, I would have reminder emails, but I would do it in different colors and use multiple colors in it to grab people's attention. And they seem to like that. Um, if I'm using or sometimes I'm sending an email, and we're talking, it could be a 500 email day, emails to people, and I'm reiterating a phone conversation, which I have to track that in writing, then I will send that text portion of what I'm confirming, maybe in a navy color instead of black, or I'll italicize it some other way, just to show that it's different and I'm affirming that language, that information. How do you think of doing that in the context of Altrusa when things are shorter?
I really use color coding a lot in my emails as well. And so I'll use color coding with the highlight background as well. So you can do the
Okay.
font in white and you can do a bolded
Mhm.
heading in, a blue highlight. And it really, I have find that really draws attention. I know that
Mhm.
Longview Kelso does that um, and they have a list of different links for signups. And
Yeah.
so everything will kind of be color coded and the links will be very clear and bolded. And so there's no guesswork as to where the link is, or there's no guesswork as to what the title of the event is. And I find it to be very helpful, especially like you said, we're all receiving so many emails. You're getting
Mhm.
500 per day. It's
Some days.
really helpful to kind of draw people's attention. I also do a lot of, if there's a date and time and location
Mhm.
for a meeting, that is a whole different color, and it can be, two spaces between the paragraph before it and two spaces after, to kind of just really make sure that there's emphasis, as that is the most important part. So color coding, bolding, bullet points, space, whatever you need to kind of just differentiate the topics or make clear what you're asking and when you're asking for it to be done. I love all of those ideas, and color coding
Okay.
is great for me. I color code everything in my life, so
Okay.
I'm totally on board with that. For other people's brains work different ways too, so it may be something that draws someone's attention, that maybe wouldn't have noticed that paragraph beforehand. So I see great value in finding anything that kind of simplifies an email, especially if it needs to be complex. Then that's just another way that you can pare it down.
Uh-huh. I took the idea from Tor Johnson when he simply asked us, if you're sending me an Altrusa email, would you just stick Altrusa in the front of the subject line? And I find, oh yeah, of course, that's so much easier. Even though we have different emails, it's still just nice to see it come there. And I appreciate that.
I've
Now
had
I
a
do it
lot of
too.
Altrusans ask about that over a number of years, just
Mhm.
because they get emails from a lot of
Yeah.
different parts of their life. And so if the first part of the subject line is Altrusa meeting agenda,
Mhm.
Altrusa event, Altrusa
Mhm.
whatever, they know that that pertains to Altrusa, and then they open it then, or they don't, or whatever.
Whenever they.
One other thing in the email part, and I know we're at time, so we want to finish up here on time, is if you get an email and someone is asking you to do something and you can't do it right then, respond back to that person saying, got it, and I will get to you in the coming week, or I'll get to you in the coming month, or whatever, just so that you acknowledge
Yeah.
that you received it and you will deal with it at a later time. Because most of the time we can't get right on something and respond immediately. But if it's important and they're anticipating a response from you, at least send back a basic acknowledgement that you will get back to them another time. And that way they know, okay, he or she's got it, and I'll wait to hear from them. And that just helps them know that you're working on it. So we covered a lot of baseline information. Are there any other questions on this? Obviously, as we said in the very beginning, each of these topics could go on for a long time. The main purpose of communicating is to share information and ideas with one another. So we just kind of hit on lots of different ways and hopefully provided some useful tips. But are there any other questions or things that we didn't cover that you really want to know this evening? Yeah, Lovey.
I know I'm I ask a lot of questions, but I have two people, actually me too, that are hard of hearing. And I've had so many times after they'd say, what did she say about this or that? And I'm thinking that we need to recognize that and have them practice sitting in different places or something to see, how they're hearing, or voice ourselves towards them, more. Yeah, I don't know. I've just have run into that several times.
Lovey, that's a really good point, and it happens often in all kinds of groups. And I'm a big proponent of using microphones and making that more normal. A lot of people are really uncomfortable speaking into a microphone, and so getting maybe a smaller one that's more sensitive, or just making people use them. It is not the fault of the person in the audience if there's a soft-spoken person that's trying to project and they're incapable of doing so. Sometimes our voices just don't carry the way we want them to. And so using a microphone or some sort of amplifying, you can also use in office settings or at meeting settings, you can get these speakers that will sit up at the podium that you don't have to speak into. And then little receivers are out in the audience. They just sit on tables and it amplifies all of the noise. Technology is so advanced that there are lots of little tools we can use, and we should make it the norm, because all ages in all groups, there is always someone that could use a little bit of louder projection from those presentations. And I would prefer that we just make it the norm that we use some sort of microphone or amplifier when we are in our groups.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments this evening?
May I have 1 minute, Governor?
Yeah, Dina, then Diane.
What I do in my club, Lovey, is, and I just started this as president. When people would talk, they would sit. I stand my entire meeting. I hardly ever sit down. I sit at the front of the room with my paper in my hands. I don't do this. And then when I have my committee chairs give a report, I ask them to stand and speak. And then I do have a couple of members, and Terry, who's my membership chair, we've discussed it with one of my members. She's usually in the back because she can't hear. So as of this coming month, we're going to be moving her up closer to the front of the room. I have no problem projecting my voice. I was in a drill sergeant unit. I can talk to you all day long without a microphone. but I realized, like I said, in prior things, people did not stand to speak. It's made a huge difference with my club. You have their attention. You can look around the room. They are looking right at you. And I kind of walk around like Alex did. I don't just stand in one spot. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on those that can't hear what's going on. And plus, one more thing really quick. I have a parliamentarian, and I am very highly, even on my agenda every month, even my board, I do Robert's Rule of Order.
Good for you, Dina.
Well, that's
good tips.
Governor.
And having people speak does often help stop some of the side conversations, because people are getting redirected to whoever has the floor at some point in a meeting. So Diane, you had to, I think you're muted here, but did you have something you wanted to share?
Yes, thank you so much for hosting this. I am from District 8, and you are just awesome. But I wanted to just check with you to see if your members happen to use their email to conduct or vote on or suggest. Well, what do you all think? They're throwing out ideas and want committee members to vote on email rather than having their official committee meeting, and how that, if that is something that your clubs are doing, and if so, how can we minimize that?
I'm going to jump in with that. So if you're going to go by Robert's Rules of Order, then you should be having committee meetings. You can do a meeting on Zoom and have an open discussion, but part of Robert's Rules of Order is giving everyone an opportunity to participate in a conversation. And in meeting in person or in meeting on Zoom, you can have a flow of information like this and everyone gets to hear it. You can do a vote by email, but it has to be ratified at the next in-person meeting. And it is not a good habit to just start an email chain of conversation and voting. So as a president of a club or a committee chair or whatever your role is, I would shut that down and say that's not the right way to do it. And if you need to use Altrusa International, uses Robert's Rules of Order, and it's only the exception under unusual circumstances that we do the sharing of ideas and voting by email. Otherwise, committees need to meet in person and or on Zoom and have the discussion to allow all the input and to take a vote with full participation. Carol, you wanted to add into that by the look of it.
No, I just want to nod my head and say yes, and that is so important. Yeah, doing that with email where everybody doesn't have access to the full conversation is just going to lead to trouble then.
Yeah.
Any
That's what
other?
I thought, and that's a concern of mine as an incoming president,
Yeah.
that it's becoming more and more common, and there is not a healthy dialogue. It's basically, this is what I'd like for the committee to do. What do you all think? And it's a minimal, almost zero discussion. So thank
So,
you. I
yeah,
appreciate that advice.
And
Carol.
look at your bylaws, Diane. It may already be in your bylaws to prohibit that very thing. If you haven't looked at your bylaws for a while, you might take a look. It may be you're out in saying, oh, it doesn't allow us to do that anyway. And as Debbie said, Robert's Rules of Orders don't allow it, but your bylaws may not either.
So I
Okay.
think Altruis International has bylaws that should have been adopted by every club.
Yeah.
And there
Yes.
are references in there to electronic meetings. So you can, as Carol mentioned, you can go back and look at those. Your local club bylaws should reflect and policies should reflect those changes from international, which happen after every convention. And I don't know if it was, I don't think it was last year's convention. I think it was the one before that, where that was voted on and changed for the process of electronic meetings. However, as an incoming president, and I've had this conversation with Dina. This is your time when you start your year as an incoming president to set the stage for how you're going to do things in your year or in your 2 years, whatever your term is. And you can say, I know this is how it's been done in the past, but actually it's not in the spirit of how Altrusa does business. It is against Robert's Rules of Order. We don't have to be parliamentary experts, but we are going to go back to some foundational things to allow everyone to have input in the way that it's intended. And so I expect in my year as president, the committees will meet in person. They don't have to meet every week. They don't have to meet every month, even. Some committees meet quarterly or once a year or whatever. But whatever their frequency is to meet in person. And a chair is elected to oversee the business of a committee. That does not give them the major vote of anything. Their vote, their opinion is absolutely equal to any other member on that committee or in that club. They do not get to declare this is how it's going to be. That is not how it is. So if you have some members that think because they're chair, they rule, they only conduct the meeting. They do not rule the decision making. That is completely against how Robert's Rules of Order is. And if you want to invite anyone, even though you're in a different time zone, I think you're 2 hours ahead of us, so thanks for being up late. But if you want to invite anyone to next February 13th meeting, there's a lot of foundational stuff in that Leadership Essentials that's about leadership and meetings and a bit of that parliamentary procedure that you and or they would learn from too. Or I can share the recording with you too if you like. So
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right. Well, we are a little bit over, but thank you for the great discussion. I hope people got a little bit of useful information tonight and some extra tips. Amber, thank you for helping organize this and doing such a great job as our district communications chair. If anyone has extra things you want to talk about, we'll stay on for a few minutes afterwards, but thanks for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it, and happy communicating.
Good night, everybody.
Hey guys,
Night,
thank
everyone.
you.
Debbie.